Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to another early show. What a morning. What a morning. What a game. What an historic matchup. Oh man, this is one for the ages. Um, sometimes World Cup finals can be deflating. In the history of the modern game, at least, they can be a little humdrum, especially those that end up going into extra time and the penalties. But this game delivered on all accounts. La Gran Finale, worthy of the name. It's hard to think of anything more dramatic. Mbappe scoring a hat trick, um, converting three penalties in a dramatic final, nerves of steel for a man who is usually singled out to be a spoiled kid. Let that be a lesson for the future. That is the heir to the throne. I wanted to start by saying that they are the losing side. I don't have much sympathy for France in general and for the French team in particular, but I do feel for them at this moment, especially for Mbappe, who will end up carrying home the Golden Boot, which will be a consolation prize for him. I'm sure it won't console him, though, much in the way that the Golden Ball for being the best player in World Cup 2014 in South Africa was not in any way in Brazil, I should say. I'm so sorry. 2014 in Brazil was not a consolation for Messi, who has realized his life goals, his dreams, everything just now. Um, wow, what an incredible game! I wore uh, today in the morning the closest thing that I have to an Argentine jersey, and I also wore my Breguet Type 20 to somehow bring together Argentina and France. And now for the ceremonial change, the Breguet is unstrapped, and we go to the blue face Seiko just to make sure that I have enough blue to represent the winners of the World Cup. I just smoked a cigar to bless uh, Santo Diego Maradona's soul, the patron saint of uh, Argentina, the patron saint of the country. Um, God bless his soul. Happy Hanukkah to all my Jewish friends as well. Uh, Sabah al Khair, my Lebanese friend, Phoenician Cedar. It's so nice to see you in the audience. Um, it's so lovely to see you. Yeah, where do we start? I mean, everything happened as it should, as it should. Um, Messi once again showed everyone how you lead a team, taking that penalty, taking the first penalty in the serial shootout, uh, scoring that dramatic goal, putting his country in the lead in the extra time as well. But it just wasn't meant to be, right? Because that handball was pretty clear. I know it's not intentional. I think it was Paredes, right, number 4, but it was clearly blocking the trajectory of the ball with his arm separate from the body. So those are the rules, and I think he ended up scoring the last penalty. it's just mind-blowing, the way those storylines intersect and somehow add up to the drama of the final. Mbappe scoring in back-to-back World Cup finals, scoring a hat-trick in a World Cup final, which I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm not sure if it has happened before. Let me see. Second player. Okay. Hurst. Okay. Jeff Hurst scored a trick. That's for him. It's good for him. The English are very fond of their storied past, but they remain consigned to history. I'm waiting for the professor to show up. I think we will have much to talk about, both in the way of watches and in the way of football. Bruce G says, incredible match. Was rooting for an ending, not on penalty kicks. So I lost. Happy Hanukkah. Thank you so much. Hag Sameach. Hey, I mean, it's... Look, I kind of evolved when it comes to the penalty kicks. I used to think that they are the proverbial equivalent of a coin toss, but it's not a game of chance. It really is not a game of chance. I think the 3 penalties that actually were given and converted during the hour and a half of the actual game, and the 8 penalties that were taken as part of the shootout, I think would tell the story that really shows how much those penalties, how much those penalty shots are part of the mental aspect of the game. I think it's something magical. It's something important. And again, this link is for anyone and everyone who has been part of the audience or not, and not just the professor. So feel free to jump on the panel and join the conversation. But it was really good. Thankfully, I had no strong emotions riding on the final. I had no strong allegiances, but at any rate, I really don't. But it was somehow very satisfying to see the Argentines and Messi win and the French lose. And my apologies to everyone who is from France and who is French in the audience. No hard feelings. But they had just won, and they had won in a final which I considered, at least in Russia, pretty anticlimactic. And I was happy to see this sort of dramatic final, because it really felt like when Mbappe converted that penalty and almost immediately scored that miraculous volley, almost instantaneously after he gave them hope by converting the penalty, I thought the tide was turning, and it is going to be a very different kind of game. But Argentinians took the lead again, and then French equalized, and then the penalties. What a drama. ABC.
Mi amigo.
¿Cómo estás, compañero?
Todo bien, todo bien. Whoa, what a match. What a match.
I was really not expecting it, especially after the last final. I was expecting something that, one team clearly dominates, and it looked like that for the first.
It looked one-sided for about 75 minutes, and then another Frenchman had other ideas.
Right, another French, Cameroonian, Algerian man.
That's right, yeah. And I think this match actually had everything. It had goals during normal time, it had goals during extra time, and I think the penalty shootout, it was poetic justice because it was one-sided and it went to the right team.
I think so. I think when you look overall to the tournament, now I have to give the French credit. I mean, there were times in the game against England where they were genuinely struggling. There were times even against Morocco when they were struggling. But
Yes, if Morocco had equalized to make it 1-1, I think that would have been very, very difficult for the French.
yeah, I agree. But at the end of the day, I think they actually played a better tournament than they had in Russia, if you ask me. I think this was a better French team than 2018. And somehow it didn't happen. Professor, how are you?
All right.
Hi,
Hey,
Professor.
guys. Hello. Hi, ABC.
Hey, and
Hello.
I'm seeing ABC that you're presenting some Francophilia with your Cartier watch in the avatar.
Yeah, that's my most recent purchase. So yeah, that's just still there, still going strong, still in the collection. But what I wanted to ask you actually, because I only caught your stream yesterday, right at the end.
Mhm.
What's your take of the tournament? Obviously, it's a lot to take in, but purely from a football standpoint, how did you feel about Morocco's journey in the tournament? Some of the newer teams, as well as the giant killing that went on.
So I think people will see in Morocco perhaps something similar to Algeria's run in 2014, right, where they went pretty strong until they fell to Germany, basically. But I think Morocco has something different now. Algeria, as you know, at that time was led by this Bosnian man who who plied his trade in France for the most part, Vahid Halilovic. And he was also the coach of Morocco before the tournament, right? And he alienated a lot of the players. He was not very well liked. He was not very popular. So he was basically fired and replaced by this young coach that they had, Rakaki, who brought back sort of the bad boys, like Ziyech, who is like kind of a firecracker. Never quite made it in Chelsea. Never quite lived up to the expectation that was placed on him, especially having come up so strongly in Ajax.
Yeah.
And I think they're a very interesting team, and I think they have a future because a lot of these players are very young. Others are young enough that they can easily go through another cycle. And there are others that, like Onahi, for example. Onahi is actually Moroccan-born, Moroccan-raised. They have a few players like that. So I'm not against the diaspora component, right? Don't take me wrong, but that kind of success can be sometimes very short-lived if you don't combine it with something else. The Turks had a similar run in 2002. Maybe you remember ABC.
Yeah, I remember.
But that was a team, again, majority of them were people from the diaspora, people who had grown up in Germany, even in England. I think there were a few even Swiss-born players in that team. And they couldn't really build on that success. They had come up to that pretty strongly up until 2002. And even after that, they sustained some success at the club level and, considerable achievements in the national level too, but they never combined that fire they had found by players who were raised in Europe, really, and who had come up in European football academies. They
And that
didn't.
is Morocco's challenge now. Can they make sure this isn't just a flash in the pan? And can they make it something that's sustainable?
Yeah.
Because they took some big scalps on their way to the semis. You know, Spain, Portugal. These aren't small teams.
Yes, yes, and which is by the way a little different than it's similar to South Korea's run in 2002 than Turkey's.
Yeah.
Again, to take away from any of the teams, and South Korea had very, again, no offense to Koreans, but they had very questionable calls against Italy and Spain when they made it all the way to the semifinal in 2002, whereas Morocco really, you know, stood their ground, played their own game, which was not necessarily negative as people make it out to be, just focusing on their strengths, which was the solidity of their four in the back, plus Amrabat and Onahi in the midfield. So
Yeah.
this is a strong team that has a very strong core, but also the ability to stage counterattacks, the transitional play, as they call it in the modern game. Great fullbacks in Hakimi and Mazraoui. And of course, a lot of talent in the front in terms of, you know, players with some flair, as in Ziyech and who was the other guy? Boufal, I think.
Buffal, yeah. Nasiri was also very good.
Yes. You know, again, it was maybe the Portuguese keeper's fault, but that guy jumped like to some divine height.
2.78 meters. That's the height of the head, which is incredible.
Professor, what do you think? What did you make of the tournament? What was your biggest disappointment? What you think was the biggest surprise?
My disappointment was that again, England, although it has probably the world's best professional league, its national team continues to disappoint.
Mm.
And it seems that the French continue to make a lot of people happy. If we put things in this context, the rest of the Europeans, I was not surprised. Croatia was really, for me, again, a testament to their sporting powerhouse. And it's not just in football. It's in many sports. In basketball, they dominate basketball in Europe and in the world. They dominate in winter sports, skiing downhill. They're really a formidable little European country that is anything but little. This is my point. Yeah.
I don't know if they dominate or not, and this is a support that I missed out a little bit. I used to follow it much more closely in the past, but they also have a quite competitive water polo team, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Serbians,
the Serbians, Serbia, Croatia
are pretty good too.
Yeah, they're very good. They're very good, and when they have goodness in a lot of sports. Basketball, a lot of them play in the NBA, in skiing, downhill. They dominate. I mean, they're there in the top 5, 6. Naturally, the Swiss and the Austrians and the Americans dominate, but Croatia is there. I mean, it is a powerhouse. We have to remember, whenever people watch the Olympics and things like the World Cup, they talk about how great a nation is. but you always have to put things in perspective in really population terms. You know, the Chinese are great, but they have 1.4 billion people to play with. And when you see small countries as well as relatively poor countries, you know, Morocco is not as affluent as France, nowhere close, or for that matter, Croatia. But when you see small countries being good in something, excelling, that's really fantastic. Small countries have a difficulty to compete with these giants. You know, France is a giant, Spain is a giant. I mean, they have 75 million people to play with. The Germans, who were really a disappointment to me. But I never liked the way they played. I mean, they were always strong, but they dominated, and I think their dominance has come to an end many years now.
Can I say something about England? I was, again, my apologies, I seemed a little too happy to enjoy their misery. I have, at the end of the day, I was raised by wolves, by which I mean Germans, for part of my life, and you know, they have taught me an important lesson in Schadenfreude, so I can't help myself. But here's a statistic that I just read when they renewed, or rather when they reaffirmed Southgate's contract until the end of the Euros. Apparently, during his tenure, England played against top 10 teams, top 10 in world ranking, 24 times. And out of those 24 games, they have only won 4. So Southgate has been pretty consistent. The players love him. The media loves him. He's in general very likable, and his team almost cleans out the competition when it comes to, you know, predictable losers. But whenever he plays against a team like Italy and France, during the game, he seems to be out of answers, right? He would never, for example, do something like Didier Deschamps did at minute 40. He said 2-0. I won't even wait until the halftime. Giroud, come here. Dembele, you made that stupid penalty as well. You come here as well. I won't give you another 5 minutes of pleasure. You're out. I will field these 2 players and change the game up a little bit for the rest of the match, 50 minutes, right? You know, you need a leader like that who knows. Southgate, neither as a player nor as a coach, ever was what you would call a great. He was a respectable player. He was a national team player. He was a top-class player, but he wasn't Mr. Champions League, for example, like Didier Deschamps was in his playing career. So you need someone, I think, to succeed at that level and not just to be contender. You need someone of an entirely different class. And I don't think the English have those sorts of coaches, unfortunately. And they had such experience.
Yeah, you forgot to mention that even against Croatia 4 years ago, they became rumbled because their run to the semi-finals of the World Cup was the luckiest run you'll ever find. They lost to Belgium in the group matches, and they beat Tunisia, Panama, Colombia, Sweden. Okay, Colombia, that, you know, they could have lost because that game went to penalties, and they finally won a match on penalties. But they never. As soon as Croatia, Luka Modric said it perfectly. He goes, "You didn't respect us, and you know, you're saying we're tired. Who are you to say we are tired?" So and the way the media overhypes the players. It's coming home with the best of a generation. This is the best chance ever to win a major tournament. It's too much, and that's why I actually prefer it when England lose, because it's so annoying, this hype, the kind of the overplaying lucky elements of their games, and then when they get caught out, they did mark Mbappe, but Griezmann, they completely forgot about, and he unpicked them.
Yeah. And sorry, Professor, we interrupted you a little bit, but I wanted to say that about England because I think that's really a difference maker at that level. I know England had very bad experience recently with Eriksson, with Capello, but I really think just like they entrust some of their best Premier League teams to really top-class coaches from abroad, I think they just need to bite the bullet and hire someone.
I agree.
At Guardiola's, at Klopp's.
I agree. I think they need to fire this guy. I think they have little. The problem with the English football is that it is
Sorry, I'll be
overhyped.
back in a minute. Okay, I'll be back in a
Oh.
minute.
Of course, sir.
It is unfortunately overhyped because of the Premier League, which has a lot of money. But you're right; they need to go for a foreigner. They need to get somebody talented. I also agree with ABC that there is a lot of hypeness in the tabloid press, and people think that football owes England a World Cup, and it's not the case because, frankly, they don't have a good team. They just keep on disappointing. I think they were just unlucky with a penalty.
Maybe football did, and that already happened in 1966 when you guys were playing the hosts basically, and the debt has been paid. Now England actually has to work at it just as hard as everyone else.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm happy Argentina won.
For me, the biggest disappointment, and I will own up to this, I basically said Denmark should go through the group very easily, and they will be one of the biggest surprises because I was really caught up on their hype in the European Championship where they performed admirably and lost on that late penalty to England, as you might remember, in the semifinal. And they had a lot of young players too, so I thought the World Cup was maybe their time. By no means did I say they will go and win it, but I basically said they will go through the group, and in the knockout stages, anything can happen. But to me, they were the biggest letdown. They were the biggest underperformers of this World Cup. I think that's the biggest disappointment, if you ask me, because look, I mean, for countries like England, if it wasn't always at the end of this sort of hype where they fall down to, at the first challenge, it's like Mike Tyson of football. Mike Tyson was a true great for most of the part, except, as he liked to say, when he got punched in the face. When he faced a certain kind of challenge that seemed to be as ferocious as he is, he usually lost. So England seems to me a little bit like that in the recent time. They are a good team. They're in fact a very good team. But when they face a greatness like Modric's Croatia, like Griezmann's France, like Italy in Wembley just a little more than a year ago, they seem to falter. So it doesn't surprise me. England is a top 8 team. England is a top 4 team. It should, in a way, always be there. And you never know. It's the smallest things that can make a difference at that level. So that, to me, is not really a surprise. Germany being knocked out now 2 times back-to-back in group stage, like you said, is not only a surprise, but a big disappointment, because Germany is not only a very affluent country, but it also has immense human resources. We usually look at it the other way, saying like, Algeria benefits from, players who were raised in the French system. Morocco benefits from, French-born and Netherlands-born, Belgium-born players, so on and so forth. But from the same perspective, Germany benefits from all these Eastern European players, who are of Polish descent, who are of Turkish descent, who are of Albanian descent, who are of a lot of times African descent, at least through their fathers. Same thing with the French. And you see Germany has built up in the first half of the first decade of the 21st century, built up a great success. And since 2014, they have been a huge disappointment. And I don't know where the problem is. Yeah, that's the second biggest. And I was actually supporting them again against my better judgment. But
yeah, but Lord, teams like that, Germany, Italy, for instance, which didn't join, they go through cycles, and the thing is, they will be there in the top 10 and top 8 and top 6. The same with Spain, they were there. They go through cycles. The issue is that poorer nations have no chance unless they have all their players playing in the Premier League or in France or in Germany. It's very difficult for developing countries to compete. Cameroon was a good example that has a tradition. Tunisia, the North African countries have a tradition. Tunisia and Morocco to always be in the World Cup. Egypt has a very good league as well. But it's like everything else, sports is all about money and investments. And we forget that when we see small countries, I was very happy to see Morocco there. I mean, in others, Croatia, more affluent, of course, to be, up in the top 16 or even top 8. It's difficult for poor countries. Argentina, by the way, is not a rich country. Over the last 25 years, it has gone through hell. If anything, Argentina has become poorer since the crisis of the late 1990s. Of course, it's a national sport, so naturally they have to produce a team, but it's not easy. It's not easy to be producing consistently players. It takes money, effort. My highlight is that I give a lot of kudos to the less to do.
It takes tradition as well, and I think that's why also, again, not to take away from how they have been performing as an independent nation. I'm talking about Croatia, but the Yugoslavia, ex-Yugoslav countries have that tradition of really committing to athletics in all aspects of the sport, in all different branches of the sport. So same thing with Argentina in either case, right? They do have a good basketball team, but football is like a religion, right? So like you said, they almost owe it to the souls of now 3 generations of players who have won the World Cup to produce a good team. And they grow up with these idols. I was just listening to an interview done for ESPN with Hernan Crespo, the striker, who apparently, I think they came to play a Champions League game or maybe an exhibition game to Barcelona when he was playing for Milan. And apparently someone said to him, "Hey, this little kid is waiting for you," and he says you're his idol. And it turns out it was Messi. And apparently when Messi introduced himself and Crespo said, "Hey, I know you," there was like a kind of glimmer in his eyes, because that was the time he was coming up in the under 20s, and they were going to win the World Cup in the under 20s, and that's tradition, right? This is a guy who has tasted every kind of success at the club level, but also he won the under 20 World Cup, he won the Olympics, right, which is an under 23 team, supplemented by, I think, 3 wildcard players. And you build on those sorts of successes at different levels throughout the years, through the decades even, to get here. It doesn't happen like this miraculously, or it can't be sustained. If it happens miraculously, it can't be sustained. You can't even see the team. Like, where's Algeria? Right? Where's Turkey?
Yeah, well,
where's Greece? Right? I mean, no offense. It was
Greece.
It was a mythical success when Greece won the European Championships in 2004. But where has Greece been since?
I think it drowned with the financial crisis it faced since 2009. It has disappeared, of course. So, no, there are many examples. I think in the case of Yugoslavia, you mentioned, tradition is important. Of course, sports has always played a role in society in Yugoslavia, but also in Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians is a good example. The Soviet Union is a good example. No, I mean, Serbia played in the World Cup, by the way, this last one. So they had a team as well as Croatia. So it's interesting that both the old Yugoslavia were there, 2 parts of the old Yugoslavia. I think the most important ones, right? The biggest one, the Serbs and the Croats, so they were there.
Compared to, again, proportionally, right? Not only Serbia and Croatia was there. I think Slovenia, since its independence, participated in 2 World Cups. They weren't here, but I think they participated at least in 2 World Cups. And Slovenia is a very minor country. Again, I don't say this in any derogatory way, but it's a very small country. So for it to have a footballing tradition, I mean, even Kosovo performs above and beyond any expectation in qualification tournaments. So it's the tradition is certainly very important.
Yeah, no, Croatia is an interesting case. I mean, again, because it's not just that; it's in other elements of industry, manufacturing. They have a certain, specialization, which makes them very interesting. Again, Serbia has also similar trends, but Croatia has been able, because of their ability to get out of Yugoslavia and post-Civil War in the 1990s and 2000s, they were the beneficiaries of a lot of money from Germany and the rest of the EU. Then they joined the EU, whereas Serbia had sanctions, never joined the EU, and kind of fell behind. But I'm trying to point to also a little bit the economics of this, because if you have wealth, it does help. If you're not a wealthy country, the only thing that helps you is your mass. So you have population and your ability to have players playing outside, like Iran, which for some reason they do make it in the World Cup, but they don't qualify for the second round.
Yeah. Hey, JB. Thank you for being here. And by the way, yes, JB, GB Vol, Phoenician Cedar.
Yeah, I like what he said, Phoenician Cedar. just what he said. Yeah, I do agree. I have to say, he's making a very good point. I think the English people, the English, by that I mean the English of the old, let's say, aristocracy, right? Not the English who, come from the former colonies or from immigrant families who were born here, but the English, there is a sense of entitlement. I agree with you. There is a sense of, yeah, we need to own it, it's ours, and all of that. Unfortunately, they haven't yet realized that the world is moving away and progressing, and they're kind of stuck in this old age of Brexit, which I think is damaging a lot the country. But anyway, this is my own view. It could be very very wrong.
Well, I mean, it's a little contentious, so as you know, I don't really like talking about things that are too politically charged. But I think there's certainly some imperial nostalgia, I think, in the sense that the English have this paternalistic view towards football, right? We invented it, and we somehow have kind of entitlement to it, that everyone has taken it after us, and somehow we enter every tournament as perennial favorites, whereas Americans maybe have that sort of view towards basketball, but they also have the ability to get humbled and get back to work. And you see that in the dream teams that they have been fielding for the Olympics, right? They don't take anything for granted. They assemble the best team they can and really want to get that gold medal. ABC, welcome back.
Thank you.
Fry says, as a Belgian, I love the British Empire. 250,000 are buried here. Well, I mean, by all means. I mean, I love for that reason, again, even though I'm not a socialist or communist by any means, I love the Soviet Union as well. Do you think they would have won that Second World War just by Churchill's rhetoric if it weren't for the Soviets?
No.
I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean they lost something like 14 million.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I think going back to the English and football, it's this entitlement they feel. Oh, it's been so long since '66. Oh, we deserve another major tournament. But well, not really, because you're not very good. Whereas if you look at they've got good players. Don't get me wrong; they've got some very good players. And now this thing about just when I left El Professor, you were talking about getting top quality managers. Now, your Klopps and your Guardiolas, they're used to working with players day in, day out, not 2 weeks every 3 or 4 months. And I think it's that contact of a club manager that would probably keep them in that line of work, as opposed to, I mean, do you remember Felipe Scolari?
Yes.
He was hounded by the press when he was considering the England job, that he said, you know what? I withdraw my application. I don't want it. Take your job.
Yeah.
And it's the press just go insane. The people go insane. It's like I said, all this, it's coming home, the hype, and they get so carried away in the media, and they overanalyze the defeats that lead to them exiting competitions. And I find it hilarious because it's the same thing every time. it's negative football. It's not so negative now, but there was a time when they were losing, England would just try and play long balls and trying to get that to work. But in any walk of life, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome.
ABC, we talked a little bit about this, and we were mostly settling on Germany, and personally, I was saying it's really Denmark for me. That is the biggest disappointment. Which team was the biggest letdown for you in this tournament? Which team underwhelmed you the most?
That's a good question. I was expecting a bit more from, I would say, I mean, this is not really a disappointment, but I was disappointed that they didn't go any further, and that was Japan, because they played with courage and heart, and I was really, really impressed with their work ethic. I mean, their fans, they were cleaning up the stadia after matches and things like that, which people couldn't relate to, but I think it would have been so much nicer to see more of them in the tournament.
You remember they like the team after their win against Spain, I think, had left everything so tidy and made like origami cranes in the locker room. Or it's my I remember I had I ordered some watch box on eBay from a Japanese seller, and it arrived in this very unassuming package. And I open it, and the box is there. Or it was a pouch, I think. The pouch is there, or some sort of travel box, travel case, or something. And there was an origami crane on top of it. I mean, what did I do for you? We just had a transaction of some stupid eBay purchase,
Yeah.
I always do admire that unassuming and rather casual aspiration to perfection on the Japanese people, because really they do it like it's nothing. That's what to me is most inspiring about that. It's not like, hey, here is a favor I do for you. What are you going to give back to me? There's no assumption, there's no presumption, there's no expectation. They just do their best.
For sure.
Which is inspiring.
Even when they describe watches, people say they go over and above describing the faults in watches because they don't want any dishonor attached or any kind of dishonesty attributed to them. And they are a credit to humanity. And you always hear of things like, if you leave your Rolex watch in your car and leave the doors open with the keys in the ignition, you'll probably still find everything there the next day. I don't know whether it's the same now, but that was the talk not so long ago. And that's, they really are. There's a lot we can learn from them. In terms of being an out-and-out disappointment football-wise, I was disappointed in Wales. I was expecting a bit more from them. They lost 2 matches and drew 1, so yeah, they were probably the biggest disappointment for me.
Yeah, I actually, to go back to Japan, I mean, GB Vol says again something relevant, but a point that we touched upon. The problem with England is that it always breaks at that level, right? That yes, they come very close, especially in Southgate's reign, and consistently close, but they always don't make it. So that's very telling. But no one really feels in the same way for Japan, which has lost to Croatia, that itself came very close to the final and played the final in the last tournament, and they lost only on penalties as well. So if England is successful for that reason, Japan should be considered successful as well for having lost to Croatia on penalties. But we don't say that. I think it's quite the other way around for the expectation they set for themselves for having beaten Germany and Spain in quick succession. I guess I was expecting them to go a little further as well. I think the fact, I think both Wales and Belgium faced this problem. Like, they, relatively speaking, they both had golden generations, but a lot of the members of that golden generation are already aging out. So you can say if Lukaku converted one of those chances,
Yeah.
they could have gone further, but they did not, and they have not. And Belgium is a big disappointment too for having been eliminated in that way.
I forgot about Belgium, actually. Yeah, they're probably more of disappointment than Wales.
I mean, again, we are talking about the semi-finalists and bronze medalists in the last edition, right? So it's not, again, it's not a minor achievement by any other standard. Of course, they wanted to finally win something, but they haven't come any closer this time around.
Very true. Very true. And I think the Germans, I think they've got a very robust academy system, and they will bring a new generation of players that will see come to fruition at the next World Cup. Maybe in the next Euros if there are already some players in the system, but you can always rely on the Germans to come up with a group of players that do go on to do very well in international tournaments.
Can I say something about that as well? I think we have said a lot about teams that have achieved much more, where the smallest things make a difference. And when it comes to Germany and to a certain extent Spain, I think when you look on an individual basis, they have a lot of great players, but both of these teams, I think, lacked a ferocious striker. Right, France had it. France had
a number 9, as they say, a number 9.
Had it in I mean, number 9 or not, France had it in Mbappe and Giroud for this tournament. The Argentinians had it, of course, in Messi and Alvarez. So it makes a difference, Germans, when they were so successful, they could count on Klose, who was a real fox, who wasn't the greatest player that Germany has ever produced by any stretch of the imagination, but he never failed to score. And Germany doesn't have that kind of player since Klose, and since, to a certain extent, Mario Gomez, but he never delivered in big tournaments in that way that Klose always has. And he was never as consistent as Miroslav Klose. And Spain didn't have it either. I mean, again, Alvaro Morata is not a bad player by any means, but he's not there when it counts.
Yeah, that golden age of Xavi, Iniesta, Fernando Torres, David Villa, that was what, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So I think, yeah, they were also quite lacking this time round, and you've got players like you said, Morata, who are more towards the later half of their careers.
But that's the thing. You mentioned one name there, Torres, right? Who again was really crucial, especially to that European Championship where they broke the curse, basically, because Spain, again, was one of those teams that always was one of the favorites and never quite managed to win at the World Cup, at least. And 2008, they started going on that streak, and Torres was an integral part of the team. And even, Chelsea hunted him down for so long, and they finally brought him on board. All that money, and people were saying he's such a big disappointment. But he scored that one goal in the semifinal that
Yeah,
brought
in
Chelsea
Barcelona.
a success they had never had before in their history, and they only could repeat it once more so far. So you sometimes need those kinds of big players who maybe don't don't perform at the level of a Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, but are clutch players, as they call in American sports. They're on fire when it counts. They play big. They come through big when they're playing big games. And I'm not sure if England has that kind of star either. They have a good team. You can count every single player, and they're all world class in a way. I understand, yes, TT Boy, I agree with you. Some of them are maybe overrated and overpaid, but a lot of them are also world class. Some players I never bought into their hype, like Jack Grealish, but when you talk about Harry Kane, that's a consistent striker that any team would die to have. When you look at Kyle Walker, for example, probably one of the best right backs in the game, and you can play him as part of at least a three in the back kind of defense. Declan Rice. Oh my God! I know maybe he's not worth 150 million pounds, which is probably how much they will pay for his next transfer. But that's one of the best number sixes in today's game. I mean, a lot of talent, but is there one player who is like Zidane, who is there when it's a big game to make the difference? I'm not sure.
Could it be Jude Bellingham in coming years? That's what everyone's talking about.
What do you think, El Profesor? Do you think Bellingham can be the next big thing?
No.
Why not?
No, I don't. I think that English football doesn't produce. It's more structural, the problem in England. They cannot produce these players. They're good, but they're not good enough. And I think it has to do with the fabric of how they are they're playing. I'm not trying to make it esoteric, but I believe not able to produce these kind of players that you guys have in mind yet. They're playing good football, but not good enough to play at the level of a final or a semi-final. And I think, just to add to what you guys said, the Dutch football team is a better football team than England. These guys have played superbly. I mean, you remember the goal they scored against Argentina. It was a fantastic play, very tactical, very strong players, and I don't think the English football teams have it to the extent that they can produce these kind of players. I think there is an endemic problem, which is that all of them are getting a lot of money, but they're not good enough. And the problem is it gets to their heads. 150, 100 million for kids that, are not really up to the game. They're good. I'm not saying they're bad. And as you said, Lord, Harry Kane does play. He is there. But, it's not good enough. As we've seen today, the beauty of the game today is that there were two players that were really great. Messi, that, as you said to me, you commented, and I agree with your comment, You said that he took the first half, he dominated, and the second half it was all Mbappe. Um, so these kind of players do not exist in England, and I don't think they will exist. There is a structural problem, but has to do more about the game itself, how it is portrayed, how society sees it, how they play up football players. It is more of a wider problem, a phenomenon that I think we touched upon it. I'm not going to say it, but one of you in the chat said the ego. It has to do more about this sense of we're very excellent players. We're getting all this money. We're going to play, but unfortunately, they don't play. They play good as a team, but not good enough. The
And
other
when it comes to Kane, by the way, again, we make excuses pretty fast, right? It's like that. People were saying if he didn't take the penalty, he would have been blamed. He took the penalty, he shouldn't have because it's against his teammate. And at any rate, who can score two penalties in the same game? Well, Messi and Mbappe just showed us how, right? Neymar had all sorts of excuses for not taking the first penalty in such a crucial game for Brazil in the shootout. Messi and Mbappe did. And Mbappe, once again, he scored a hat trick. Yes, two of them were penalties, but when Kane doesn't score, we come up with excuses. Oh, it was against Lloris. He already scored one. He didn't know what to do. Mbappe, nerves of steel, scored twice in 120 minutes, including the extra time. And then the first penalty, he scored that too. Three penalties, same game. He didn't even break a sweat.
I on this issue of the penalties today, Lord, I was really scared with the way Messi was scoring and how he was hitting the ball. There was a sense of comfort when he was scoring, but he was a little bit too comfortable. He looked very comfortable in the way he also scored the last penalty, which was really a walk in the park. But at the same time, I was very conscious that these guys could mess it up. Really, as you said, they played well, and these two guys are getting very well paid, exceptionally astronomically paid to score penalties. So if they miss it, that you have a problem. So that's it. There are no excuses. England didn't make it, and I think also I wanted to say I agree with Fries and with Mayo that Brazil to me was a disappointment.
That's true.
I mean, they didn't show anything. If Japan was a big surprise, which I was very happy, I don't think they're very talented. They just run. They have endless energy. These guys run up and down. I don't think they're as talented. The Brazilians just didn't play. I mean, they were like they didn't exist in this World Cup.
Well, Brazil's problem always is, not problem, but the issue that we have as football fans with Brazil is they can show us something like that first half in South Korea, which looked like they were playing. I thought someone plugged the PlayStation and was playing a video game. That was the first half in South Korea. But the World Cup, to win the World Cup, you have to play well for good stretches of 7 games, not just 45 minutes. So Brazil shows us glimpses of otherworldly brilliance. And then in other moments, they're just perfectly human and fail miserably. And it's a huge disappointment. Again, what happens in those those penalties, why didn't Neymar take the first one and relieve the pressure on his
Yeah.
team the way that Mbappe and Messi have done? Bezos says it the best here. The best players, or the best athletes really, are comfortable being uncomfortable. That's Messi's penalty taking for you, Professor.
Yeah.
He is actually uncomfortable because the entire weight of the world rests on his shoulders at that moment, but he just shrugs it off because it's his job. Like you said, you know, he's being paid for it and he enjoys it. Sorry, ABC, you were saying something?
Yeah, no, just a couple of things that El Professor brought up. That Netherlands goal, I think Weghorst, it was very similar to the 1998 goal with Veron and Zanetti against England. Do you remember that?
Of course I do. I remember every time England gets eliminated. It's my favorite part of every
Yeah.
It was almost carbon copy of that. They're expecting a shot at goal, but they instead pass it to someone in the wall, and they see an open goal, and they slot it in. And that for me was one of my favorite goals in the tournament. Just
Yes.
because no one expected it, apart from the Dutch players and the bench.
Mm.
And so that was really, really good to see. It'd be nice to see more of those. I don't know whether they will, because you want to be unpredictable. You don't want to make the unpredictable predictable. So I'd say that. I mean, Brazil. I've always been a bit annoyed by Brazil. One, every World Cup. Oh, Brazil are one of the favorites. Why? I've never seen them play. Just because they're Brazil, people think they've got some God-given right to do well in World Cups.
Yeah.
I guess nowadays we are seeing more of their players in the Premier League. But you see, I've always thought, when we look back to say over the past 20 or so years, the good teams had their players playing in other leagues. Argentina, France, who else was there? Well, Brazil, actually. A lot of their players would actually play in Italy, Spain, and then it's starting to become more England now. I guess Italy have always had their players playing in their home league, and so have England. So it's a strange dynamic because, like I said, the French, they've had a few players in their home leagues, but their big players generally play abroad.
Mm.
I think maybe you're right. Maybe that sort of international experience of really having integrated into different styles of playing perhaps helps.
Yeah. Different coaching styles should bring a richness to your game. And I mean, I think Germany, they've always had a lot of players, significant portion of their players playing outside of Germany as well.
Right. I mean, look, it's Serie A in the 90s was like the Premier League. I mean, in a smaller scale, of course, right? You know, the Premier League now, in terms of commanding global capital, is at another level. But Italy in the 90s and Serie A was where the big players went for big money, right?
Yeah.
But funnily enough, Italy didn't win. In 94, they came pretty close but lost on penalties. They became world champions again in 2006, not when Serie A was dominating club football. And, you know, maybe we have something similar here, you know, where you have a lot of English players kind of sitting pretty and being too comfortable in getting lavish amounts of money and great contracts and not really moving far away from home. And maybe it's not ironic and quite significant actually, that you hang your hopes up on that youngster who left the comforts of home when he was, what, 15, 16, and started playing in Germany. And he's still at BVB. He's still a Dortmund player. So we will see if that sort of generation that finds it perhaps a little hard to break through the ranks of the Premier League and seeks other sorts of challenges abroad, maybe they will bring finally something back home. Even though Sancho's return, for better or worse, was so far a big disappointment in Manchester United, of course.
So far, he hasn't lived up to the expectations, but I think Premier League, they expect to be full of pace and like a winger like Ian Robin, players like that. Whereas I don't think Jadon Sancho plays that way, and Borussia Dortmund also don't play that way. So I think he will have to adapt his game somehow. I would say with the likes of, I mean, I personally think if I look back to the last Euros, Raheem Sterling was the most dangerous player, and that he played with no fear, and I think that is what got England to the final of that tournament. And we need more of that. Take players on, get past them. Where I've just seen Mbappe and how his work ethic on the pitch within his half of the pitch is phenomenal. He doesn't track back, but then again, is he meant to track back and defend? Not, you would say not necessarily so. We have people like Griezmann who will. He's everywhere, and he started out, funnily enough, as a number 9. He was a striker. He was a centre forward, but he has now taken on so many more aspects to his game, and I don't know whether you get English players doing that. Because they all say, "Oh, but the Premier League's the best league in the world. Why can't we perform?" Well, it's probably because of the foreign players that you're attracting. When they go back to their countries, they are reaping the benefits of playing in another league outside of their home nation.
I can tell you that this is, again, I agree with what you say, ABC. I want to relate also in my world, in my profession, I see it with students. The majority of the students, the hardworking ones, are foreign, and they're usually from Asia. The ones that predominantly come with this entitlement do not do very well at university. And you see the same kind of discourse about the country, as you know. For instance, the property market. Oh, the property market is fantastic in London. Yes, but then who buys the property? They're not British people, all foreigners. And there is this kind of illusion, not delusion. There is this illusion that it's all us, the English people, doing all this, but actually, it's not. It's everybody else doing it. But then the English taking credit, which goes back to the issue about the Premier League. To your point, I got to meet a couple of these kids. I say kids because they're young. I mean, they're not my age. And a couple of months ago, I was out for a dinner. I was invited with a couple of them because they're into watches. Every footballer is into watches. And of course, they wanted to invite the professor. So I was the oldest. And you should have seen their collection of watches. I mean, there was nothing imaginable of the boxes they opened and showed me. I was like the professor of watches. Of course, I'm not a professor of watches. I just like watches, but this sense of, it was telling. The reason why I'm saying this is that their appreciation of watches is as a result of the wealth, but the extreme wealth and the very fast wealth that was accumulated. So it gets in their heads that we're the best, we are there, we're getting paid crazy sums of money, and then we go and play for the team, for the national team, and we don't win, right? I mean, it's
That's an amazing analogy actually, and it rings true because when I was at university, it was mainly the Hong Kong Chinese or Singaporean Chinese students who would outperform us. I mean, I was an engineering graduate, so yeah, they were by far and away ahead of us. But then also the Europeans, especially the Germans and French, would look at our course and laugh at how simple it is because they've done all this stuff before, but it's more widely recognized having spent time in Britain. So it was a win-win for them, and we're thinking, oh wow, your degrees must be so difficult, and and yeah, and with the property market, who's buying these properties in London? I imagine it's a lot of Chinese and Russian people, amongst other nationalities, Arabs as well. And it's this thing about, well, we're facilitating the banking system, and it's a service-driven uh,
very
economy, not products.
absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know, Lord, would you like us to discuss the watch you're showing us, or shall we?
Uh, yeah, we can. I mean, this is the watch that Messi was wearing during the World Cup, which is kind of the king of all Nautiluses, and in a way, all Pateks in a way, in terms of modern, because as much as they like to deny it, that is the watch that has defined the brand in the last 5 years or so, and continues to do that. And this is 5940 in white gold. No, sorry,
Beautiful.
5740 in white gold, which is a Patek Philippe Nautilus perpetual calendar.
Hmm.
SP, 20 pounds sterling. Thank you so much. To be fair to England, they have a fantastic team. I don't disagree with that. Top 4 or top 5 in the world. Again,
I disagree with that. I disagree with the second.
well, I
sentence.
mean, on paper, I guess being eliminated in the quarterfinal doesn't mean you get into top 4. So objectively, perhaps not. But I guess in terms of the consistency, again, yes, Southgate took this team to the semifinal in Russia. They lost third place game against Belgium. Southgate took this team to the final in Euro 2020 +1. And Southgate took this team to the quarterfinals. So over that, narrative arc, England is one of the top 4 teams, but England sees itself as being the top team. And to achieve that kind of success, they have so far fallen short. But as a team, on paper, certainly they're one of the best. And that's the problem. That's why people expect, even the non-English people expect actually more from England, even if it's off-putting, this sense of entitlement before every tournament.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I think this will be the perpetual calendar dream.
Yeah, this is. I think even the most storied collectors have like a multiple year wait for this kind of piece. The famous Gary Getz, who kind of writes this resident collector pieces, the Quill and Pad. I think he put his name down like 2-3 years ago, and he just received his the 5740G. So this is a very desirable piece indeed, and it only makes sense to see it on Messi's wrist.
Yeah, if anyone deserves it, he does.
Oh, certainly. Certainly.
We said a lot of nice things about Japan and Japanese people. Maybe we can also talk about this watch a little bit, which I find to be very elegant and striking, even though I have a couple of things to nitpick, as I always do. Have you seen this one?
No, I haven't actually.
So this is a Seiko Presage they released to celebrate their 110th year in watchmaking. And it's a kind of tribute to this piece they have in their museum, which is kind of a conversion pocket watch.
So what's that indicator at 9 o'clock in Seiko? Is that a power reserve?
Yes.
Okay.
Charges up, charges down, basically, right? So the more you charge it, it goes down, because that's the 40-hour power reserve.
Okay.
And this subdial is actually a date, pointer date, rather than running seconds. So it's a little, that would be my nitpick. I think for all its beauty, the watch is slightly confusing. But I think they had aesthetic concerns to replicate this. Maybe they could have preserved the small seconds and had a pointer date on the periphery of the dial. But who am I to say? I mean, they know how to design their watches better than I do, I guess.
I've got all the time in the world for Seiko and Grand Seiko, and I'm not hung up about spending whatever it would be on a Grand Seiko and having the name Seiko on the dial. Personally, some people do have a complex against that.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. I have, this is one of my proverbs. My stance on Grand Seiko is I never spend more than $1,000 on a Seiko.
That's a good one.
For that, but yeah, I'm guilty as charged. I have that complex for sure.
What does El Professor think of Seiko and Grand Seiko?
I think they're very beautiful. It really represents the advancement of the way the Japanese think and perceive watches. I know people scorn upon the manufacturer for various reasons, but no, I see it as a Lexus. And who says no to a Lexus? In my opinion, Lexus is one of the best made cars, the entire brand. It is a Toyota, but
Yes.
in my it is above everybody else. I believe Toyota, in my opinion, again, this is a very subjective issue, is the best car. And within the Toyota line, I only drive a Land Cruiser.
Mhm.
So if I were to have the money to buy the equivalent of that in a Lexus, the LX 570 or whatever, it's the same as a Grand Seiko. And if people want to talk about their Nautilus and their Rolex, that's great. That's great. But they are mechanically fantastic watches.
Well, I'm wearing a Seiko 5 right now, so for
Yeah.
that I have no complex, right? I proudly wear my Seiko, but I have to say again, I'm prone to vanity as much as the next person, and I think it is a branding mistake. And I'm so glad that you brought up the example of Lexus. Um, we could be. I'm saying this very seriously now. We could be having a different conversation if Seiko actually bothered to come up with another name for their prestige brand, like Creedor, for example, which produces watches so
Yeah.
unique and so artful that people are actually willing to pay hundreds of thousands for them. Whereas Grand Seiko just seems like a elevated Seiko, and sometimes, again, in all our vanity and in all my inferiority complex, I admit it.
I agree.
I just can't bring myself to spend a certain amount of money on Grand Seiko, whereas I buy Seiko watches at $300, $400 a pop, almost on an annual basis. So I think it is a marketing question. It is a branding issue. This I found, like the Seiko Presage and Prospects series, I've always loved. And this watch is actually, again, a very faithful, of course, enlarged reproduction of that historic Laurel watch, which was made in 1913. So this is coming up for the 2023 as a limited edition. It also has a beautiful enamel dial. And you can even see it in pictures, how striking it is with those beautifully stylized Breguet numbers with the red numeral at 12 o'clock. The hands are heat blued and really, I think, really look gorgeous against the white enamel of that piece. Yeah, I think this is a great piece. I love also the way they even stayed faithful to that particular strap design. The onion crown has a beautiful vintage inspiration.
How much is this watch?
Let's see. One of 2,500, by the way, so it's not that limited after all. But the price, I don't find it yet. Let's see what Dr. Google, Bobby Google says for us. Professor Google.
They're real.
You may need to inquire within a boutique or a store.
Monochrome Watches says 1,900 in euro. So,
Okay.
2K, let's say. This is what's gonna be. And it will be available in January in a limited run of 2,500 pieces in Seiko boutiques and select retail partners worldwide. It's a 37.5 millimeter in diameter, less than 13 millimeter in height, so it's not too thick either. 12.6 specifically. And it's also 50 millimeter water resistant, so it will at least go through the day without any difficulty. It's something that can easily be used as a daily wear. 45-hour power reserve with the Seiko caliber 6R27.
Lord, I liked what you said yesterday.
What did I say, sir?
You said that I continue my quest in acquiring a platinum.
Yes.
Rolex. I like the word quest.
Yes, I mean, I hope it didn't sound,
I
you know,
like.
yeah. I hope you didn't take any offense at it,
No,
because
no,
I
not
like
at
the
all.
storyline. I like the storyline that you are pursuing this. You know, including the community in your decision making process and
You
unfolding it bit by bit.
you know, I exactly. I'm saying this is kind of my current thinking. So I'm saying to myself, should I ever buy many watches? If I do buy many watches, that's the if I buy five, that's the equivalent of platinum. 50,000, 55,000, or thereabouts is the platinum. If you add the diamonds, which my mom loves, it'll probably be 60. But don't ask me why my mom believes I need to have the diamonds. But moms, when they say something, you need to listen. So I listen to her. And so I'm saying to myself, why should I buy four or five of these watches and not get one? So why should I think, Pepsi, Panda, Manda, Lambda, and all of that? Just go for one whenever that happens, right? Um, anyway, I'm using you.
Well, that's an interesting idea. For those who have as many watches as they do, say more than five, how many of them get any wrist time? Especially if you live in a certain part of the world, are they spending most of their time in the bank safe?
Exactly.
Fear of watch crime. I mean, obviously, if you're to wear a platinum watch, that can make you a target, but then again, it would take a very well trained eye, depending on what watch it is, to recognize that it's platinum. But in some ways, less is more. Just from a collection point of view, I respect that, and I definitely uh, feel that as well. I think when you have 10 watches, does it dilute the importance of the watches? Whereas if you have, say, maybe four, maybe five tops, will you value and would you love your watches more and wear them and use them for what they're intended?
Exactly. Exactly. I feel a lot of people go through the agony of acquiring and getting the next one and then the next one, and they line up the usual suspects, I call them, in the Rolex lineup. They have the Panda, the Pepsi, the Batgirl, Batman, the Hulk, the Kermit, Sermit, whatever. um, and then the second tier, right? I call them second tier because they're less hyped. And then they agonize. Will I get that? Will I get the other one? Will the AD call me? Will I be nice to them? And then why go through that pain in life? In any case, and why agonize? Get one, wear it, tear it. Life is short, um, and just have fun. You can do the same, by the way, with Nautilus. I mean that's more difficult because you need to pay much more. But it can be a one and done watch. Although I wouldn't recommend it. It's quite difficult. I mean, to see the Nautilus having all the scratches, and then you go mad. I have a friend who goes mad with a scratch, and he was a collector. He stopped collecting watches because he couldn't deal with the scratches. He suffers, of course, from all kinds of obsessions in life. That's one of it. And I'm of the mindset, why agonize about the next piece and the next piece? Because there will always be somebody who has more than you, more than the other guy. It's like the billionaires who have yachts, and then I see them when they park their yacht. somewhere, and then some other yacht comes in and they're twice the size of the one I'm in on. The owner goes nuts and they leave for another location where they are the biggest yacht. So I think it's, I mean, it depends on what mood you're in psychology. Perhaps I'm in a different mood. It doesn't have to be that I'm correct or wrong. There is no right or wrong. You can do what you want, but you need to be enjoying your watches. And I told a story the other day where I have another friend who has a huge collection, and he goes out wearing three watches on each um, arm, hand, wrist.
Yeah, well, I'm sure his excuse is life is short, but in this environment, that might be a self-fulfilling prophecy for him. But God forbid. But honestly, even wearing one luxury watch in the wrong place at the wrong time can be something else. You have to be situationally aware. You have to avoid places where you will have to whistle in the dark when you're all alone. And you just have to practice some common sense. So I don't get caught up in narratives of watch crime, but they're also real. So you have to be careful and casual at the same time. If you're interested in luxury watches and if you actually enjoy them, you have to wear them. You cannot just tuck them away in a bank safe like the professor does up there. You have to actually wear them.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I think it's one of those things where, I mean, a lot of footballers. I think Raheem Sterling recently had his house burgled, and they took £300,000 worth of watches, which is terrible, which is awful. And
imagine, that usually it takes them a little more ingenuity, to figure out if you are away from your home. In Sterling's case, everyone knew that he was in Qatar with his national team, so it's particularly cruel.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't play games such as streaming on the streets of London, stopping random people asking how much do you think my watch is worth, as some people do elsewhere in the world. But yeah, so you do need to be situationally aware, as you put it, streetwise, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's. I mean, did you hear about what was that? Watchmaster. They sell watches in Berlin and London, and one of the safes that they use got broken into.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think,
Sorry.
is it £12 million or euros worth of watches were taken?
Yeah. From a former bank vault. Yeah. It used to be a bank vault. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's not just stopping someone on the street and mugging them. It's going all the way to former bank vaults or bank vault status security buildings being raided. It's insane.
Yeah, I have seen a few things about that. I didn't know the detail of it, honestly. Yeah, that's on another level. It's we are usually talking about the smash and grab type of thing, or gun to the head, or knife to the chest kind of danger usually. But that's another level, when you talk about burglaries and stores being broken into, or safes and vaults being infiltrated. I don't even know how to contemplate something like that, frankly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's getting. It is getting worse and worse, and something will have to give. Something will have to be done about this.
What can be done?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think people also, ABC, need to learn to be more modest. I think we lived over the last 12 years in this hoopla decade where everything was based on how big it was, how expensive it was. Mine is greater than his, and people need to be a little bit more modest about what they display, how much they display, and how they need to be a little bit more caring about their neighbors. You know, philanthropy is not only for those who become billionaires and suddenly before they die, or because they want to have a little bit of soft power, they donate a few billion. Um, I think the last 12 years damaged our thinking of who we are, what we do. So we need to display modesty as well, I think. It does,
Absolutely.
you know,
Speaking of which,
yeah.
by the way, do you guys want to comment on this piece of news? We have just heard that Bernard Arnault
Oh,
has superseded Elon Musk to become the richest person in the world. And as you know, the Arnauds also control through LVMH, through Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, a lot of important watch brands too. Tag Heuer, of course, Zenith, as well as Louis Vuitton, which they are trying to prop up as a watchmaker more recently. Bulgari, which they have cultivated to make a contender, at least a respectable um, competitor in the horological space. What do you think about this piece of news, Professor?
yeah, uh, wonderful. What I would like to see of Mr. Arnault is what he gives back to his country. Because one thing about American billionaires, just as an extension to what we were discussing, they do at some point, usually 10 years before they die, usually.
How do you calculate that? Do rich people also know when they will die? That seems to be much more important than any capital that
Yeah,
money.
well, they tend to when they hit their 80s, like Warren Buffett did. He started thinking, "What do I do with my money?" Um, and of course, Jeff Bezos has done it earlier, and others as well. But I think Arnault needs to also look at how big he is and what he gives back to society, whether it's in France or the wider community. I think the only thing remaining for the Arnauds is to buy Patek Philippe, which is his last dream, which I think won't happen. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's just cyclical because eventually, if the stock price of Tesla goes up, um, Elon Musk will dwarf once again Arnault. But it does show you that they are the big boys, and yeah, they should do well. So we buy more watches, and they become wealthier. Like, by the way.
What do you think, ABC?
I generally tend to be quite philosophical about wealth. I think there's a certain amount beyond which it doesn't matter how much money you got, because you'll live in a similar style house, you'll wear the same kind of clothes, wear the same kind of watches, drive the same kind of cars, but you'll just have more of them. And you can only live in one house at any one time. But good for him.
Well, I will say one thing about what the professor has said, just to present really a not really an opposing view, but a different perspective on it. The reason that American billionaires and the rich do so much philanthropy is because our state does, excuse my French, fuck all for its people. So that task is delegated to the rich, to the privileged, to the socioeconomically ascendant, to the affluent. Whereas in France, the state actually does take care of their people, and the state actually does tax the rich. So if you, I mean, I will just, I know people don't care about this stuff anymore, but I will still insist. I like books, right? So I'll make this argument for culture. When in France, an important, culturally significant book is released by a writer of some renown, it comes out in pocketbook versions, right? Where students and even people who don't have a lot of money can get a copy of that book right away for 2 euros, let's say.
Really?
To make a part of their library. In the US, when a significant book comes out, it comes out in hardcover. That's at least $35, $40, if not $75, $80. And only libraries can afford to buy them. And even libraries won't care to buy these books anymore. So when you, in any country in this world, whatever language you are reading in, get a book from the library or from the bookstore that is translated from French. Open the first few pages where you have this paratextual information. You will see a stamp of the French Cultural Ministry, and it will say this translation was subsidized by such and such fund. So I don't know what Arnaud will do with his excessive wealth, and whether he will actually, or whether he already does any sort of charity. But there's this difference between the US, which doesn't do anything for its people and doesn't bother to tax the rich, and therefore the rich do feel obliged to give back to their country, to their people, because at least some people are socially conscious enough to realize that sort of gap and disparity and that sort of indebtedness they have to the networks that have supported them, to the people whose backs they have stepped on when they were coming onto this wealth. Whereas, the French state still does something for its people, whereas the American federal state has basically never done anything for its people. I mean, even the infrastructure is extremely lacking in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a fair amount of time in the Gulf, and I found you generally find three generations of people. The best are those who are actually unfortunately dying out now, because they've experienced the hard times when there was, before air conditioning, being so ubiquitous and everywhere. And before massive cars and that kind of wealth, and then you've got their children who were sort of fed with the silver spoon. They were actually in some ways the more arrogant ones, because all they've known is wealth, and it is relatively quickly obtained, and so that's the only life they've ever known. Those who actually travel out to Western countries to study or whatever, that's when they actually realize that you don't actually matter just because you have come out, just because you are from a certain family. No one cares about that in countries like America, Canada, Britain, Australia. And so they actually gain a wider appreciation of the world outside their country. And I think in some ways the younger generation are actually getting better because of the kind of globalization, and they're they're a lot more aware of the world outside their country. And yeah, so that's wealth, especially when it comes so quickly, can really have an effect on a society over many generations.
So St. Peter has an interesting point. I don't want to divert from the weight of your statements. ABC will turn to it, but I want to read this. $5. Speaking of charity, thank you for the $5, St. Peter. Some might say charity and philanthropy exist only to alleviate the failures of a state or society, and therefore are symbolic of such failures.
Interesting point. Very interesting.
May I say something, because
Of course, Professor.
I can write many books on this, because I've served in many capacities, both in philanthropy and at the level of foundations, which I cannot explain here where. But the only way that science is going to advance through research is by having large amounts of philanthropic support. The scientific research that we see in the US and the UK is mainly as a result of donations from very well endowed foundations, or billionaires who are ready to kick the can, and they decided to give money to a university. And that's because the state is failing in the West. It is failing because it has all these asks and it cannot meet them. So research is rarely done as a result of state support. And I see it also in my own university, where large donations are given to either put together colleges or to do research. I do hope that Arnaud realizes that nobody will really care if he had a watch company or a shoe company or a bag company, but people will care that about 21 million people are dying of cancer every year, and it's getting worse. And there are about 9 million people in the UK alone waiting to do surgeries, both basic and complicated, because the system is collapsing. So philanthropy really has a lot to do here. Just to finish my point about on the quick wealth, I think ABC. Of course, this is not the time and also place, but and Lord knows this. Um, the golf, there is no one golf, as there is no one Europe. Um, Certain countries in the Gulf region, as you know, are um, more mature in exactly the transitioning from the second to the third generation and going from rugs to riches. In fact, not too long ago, I was sitting with somebody who has a very important position of power, and he said to me, I do remember when I was a young kid growing up in a tent. He, I said to him, well, you know, you now wear a 5276 on a leather strap. He said, I don't know what's that. It was a gift from the ruler. So I don't know if it's 5276 or 7652. um, However, I would say that there are certain countries in the Gulf that are still thinking there is this arrogance about wealth. And now, more recently, there is this arrogance about identity, nationalism, and the sense of we are the chosen people, kind of. And this, of course, is manufactured nationalism. We're great, we're big, we are, you know who we are, type of thing. And I think also this is different from the older Gulf um, days, who the older generation of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and the ones who first made it with the first rally in the price of oil were more modest. The ones
Yeah,
who really went from rags to riches.
sure.
The young generation is very arrogant, and I don't want to name them, by country, but um, I feel that some of them are more modest than others, um, and we can have an offline chat about this.
Yeah,
But that's all.
yeah. There is, some very interesting points there, and it's. I mean, look, you'll get in every country. You'll get good people. You'll get bad people. You'll get some very what we would class as very wealthy people, but they're very generous. They're very humble, and you get people who are the opposite, and
I like that. Yeah.
you and you'll get people who don't have much, but they're still very giving.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you would find people who have barely anything but would give you the shirt off their backs, right? As one says.
Yeah,
So,
Yes.
for sure. I do want to. I'm glad, Professor, you actually uh, put put your money where your mouth is in a way, because you have said many times on this channel, uh, and you have mentioned that you make a point of reminding a lot of these executives and watch industry people that you meet, um, that they're not curing cancer, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm glad it comes full circle now, and you are saying that, hey, Monsieur Arnaud, there are millions of people dying from cancer and much more from other curable, but for now um, uncured diseases. And maybe the billions of dollars you are trying to spend on the next acquisition, which seems to be, at least as a goal, as an aspiration, Patek Philippe, could be better spent on some sort of research, perhaps. I know this is a big debate, and I have I have all sorts of educated and uneducated opinions about big pharma and how they are trying to devise ever more ingenious ways of keeping people on medication rather than actually trying to attend to them and curing to them. But that's another discussion altogether. I feel that as both individuals and as societies, sometimes we can spend our money on more noble causes than our next acquisition. And I know some of this will ring hypocritical, since this is, after all, a watch channel, and I am a watch consultant of sorts who advises people, to what to get as your next watch. But I think we need to find some sort of balance between these sorts of simple earthly pleasures and loftier aspirations that actually reach out and help out our fellow human beings.
Very well said. I completely agree. Yes. Yeah.
I'm just echoing what you said in another register. So I haven't said anything.
Lord, one thing also I want to criticize, even the watch industry, often the luxury industry also. You remember more recently I was sharing the example of my friend. We went together. He was in London, and we went to Harrods, and they were giving us all kinds of grief at the Hermes shop. Are you on the list? Do you have an appointment? If you don't have an appointment, you cannot go. And we said, we just want to buy a tie. It's just one tie. We know which tie. Can we? It's over there.
Especially in this time of, in this juncture of history where no one buys ties anymore. By the way, they should be thankful to you for wanting to buy a tie.
Yeah. And they were becoming fussy. Eventually, we got the tie and all of that. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then again, we go to the Audemars boutique. He wanted to get he wanted to see the 50th anniversary AP Royal Oak steel and 41 millimeters. I'm just making it more precise. And the guy on the door was like arrogant. And I said, what exactly are you guys selling here? We are the customers. I mean, we're the clients. You're treating us like we're garbage. Oh, sir, sorry, if you don't have an appointment, we cannot see you. I mean, there is nobody inside. I said, what's going on? Are you at the doctor's? I mean, is this the doctor's office? And he said to me, no, this is policy, and all of that. So I think the luxury industry needs to come to grips with reality a little bit. Unfortunately, it's as part of the frothiness. I'm sorry, I'm going back to my economics, which is the 12 years of craziness that we have gone through, and it has come to an end, right? So I think that, yes, it's important to enjoy what you do, whatever you do. And I think what ABC said is also very important. For these guys, the billionaires, whether you have 30 or 40, it doesn't really make a difference at all. If you are between 500 million and 10 billion, it does make a huge difference, because you're not able to make it. You rent a boat, you don't own a yacht. You can own one, but it's a much smaller one. But if you are in the multiple of billions, nobody really cares, right? But I think we lose our humility when we get into this watch world. And the Swiss, especially some of the brands, Patek has become very arrogant. Rolex, very arrogant. Their authorized dealers, probably more. Rolex was always secretive. I mean, you can't just walk in and say, hi, I'm here to look at your head office. you can't. There is a museum. You can visit the museum, but that's about it. Nobody else will see you. And if you work for Tudor, I'm sorry to say, I'm just giving you an example. You can't go into the Rolex offices, whereas if you have a Rolex card, you can go into the Tudor offices, right? And this is not to belittle Tudor. Tudor is a fantastic brand. I'm just saying that the whole industry became arrogant. Vacheron, Richard Mille. I mean, what are they selling exactly? Audemars calibers in a case that costs $500,000 for a hip hop artist. I mean, that's great. And I think they've gone a bit crazy, the Swiss, with their
Honestly, at this point, that I look. I mean, this is another debate. We can have maybe an entire segment on this in a future show, because I'm planning to close it very soon. But I think hip hop and rap music and culture in general has given so much to these luxury brands
Yes.
in the last decade, in terms of free promotion, really.
Yes.
Free advertising. Anything they do for the rappers is just paying back. Call it reparations, if you will. I'm sorry, but this is my particular view on that.
Yeah.
But again, with AP, I have an entire case against them. I feel it's shameful that they are sanctifying this guy who has spent an entire decade trying to look like he's in his 20s, even though he is 60 something years old. I find it a little bit childish, and just I find them extremely arrogant for no particular reason at that segment. And it's because I find it very discordant with the horological values that Audemars Piguet actually, to me, embodies at a certain level. But that's a very, very long-winded discussion. I am going to get last words from you guys, but Thomas joined us in the chat, and I think he has something very, a nice summary. I think I probably saw the best World Cup final I've ever seen today, certainly from emotional aspects, from the way that the great players have delivered in a major way. I completely agree with that statement. I'm so glad that Messi finally won his cup in Maradona's memory. It's as if to lift, Santo Diego Maradona to that level of Madonna. Maradona's memory, of course, that's just a simple misspelling. So glad that Morocco got as far as they did as well. What a spirited team. Thomas, as always, beautifully put. All right, so ABC, just some concluding remarks.
Well, I enjoyed the World Cup. I think it was a great tournament. I think we may see more of these in-season tournaments now, because the African nations have been doing it for God knows how long. But I think it's taught us that a World Cup can be done mid-season, and I think there were the fair share of upsets and shocks and delights, and it was an enjoyable tournament.
ABC, there's that apocryphal saying that is attributed to many Chinese revolutionary leader, sometimes to Mao, sometimes to others. They ask him, what do you think about the French Revolution? And he says, it's too early to tell. I will say, mid-season World Cups, it's too early to tell the success of it. Let's see how the rest of the season unfolds in terms of mental and physical fitness of of some of the most important players. Let's see how they perform, whether they can even physically make it to the end of the season after this sort of tournament, and then decide whether a mid-season tournament works. I have all the respect for African Cup of Nations. And I understand it's its own tradition. It happens every 2 years rather than 4. It happens in mid-season because of really health concerns more than anything, because it can be too hot, especially in sub-Saharan Africa in the summer. But to have a tournament of this scale that involves so many players. And now they are entertaining these ideas with Gianni Infantino introducing a new World Club Cup competition that will have 32 teams and whatever. They're constantly burdening players more and more. And again, I know they make a lot of money. I know they earn a lot, and they are very popular and they're adored and admired. But they're also human beings, and they also have families. They also have health. And they also deserve a break. So I'm not sure how this thing is developing. At the end of the day, they are trying to make more money, expand it to different markets. But sometimes you need to also think of the main actors of this sport, which are the players, and their health is important. And we will see what happens in the second half of the season. I don't want to, ring any alarm bells. I don't have any scientific evidence, but let's see how it affects their mental and physical health in the second half.
Is Copa America ever played mid-season?
I have not heard of it. It has.
Okay. Interesting. But yeah, it was an enjoyable tournament, and it's back over to you.
I love especially the final. I was kind of dreading an anticlimactic final, and this delivered so much more than what I was expecting. What about you, Professor? Whether soccer related, football related, or watches, you have the last word of the broadcast.
Thank you. This will be the most expensive World Cup in the history of World Cups. What we know is that its estimated cost was north of $200 billion, which is the GDP of more than the GDP of Greece. It's very obscene. You might say that the hosts have the highest, if one of the highest per capita incomes in the world, but $200 billion is a lot of money to be hosting for 3 weeks people playing football. So we need to put things in perspective, and the cost is an issue. Not everything is for money, and not everyone can host them just because they can throw at it money. That's all.
Well, thank you for putting it in perspective, Professor. Again, it will go down. I think it was one for the ages because of the narratives that intersected, both around Messi and Mbappe, both around Argentina and France, who were both vying for the third star on their jersey for their third World Cup. Argentina succeeded in doing that, but at what cost? But it will go down in history books, and Qatar will be remembered as the location where one of the best players ever, one of the greatest players ever, and arguably the greatest, as the argument had it, has become a world champion on their soil, and that's something that history will record and repeat.
It was quite interesting since ABC has spent time in the Gulf, but Lord, you would have seen that as well during the very end. when he was about to receive the trophy, Messi, he was given to wear a bisht. I don't know if you know the word bisht, but
Yeah.
it's the golden embroiled cloth that is put ceremoniously on top of the thobe, the white dress the Gulf Arabs wear. And it was interesting. I asked my wife, why did they do that? And she said, well, the way she saw it is because they gave, it was like giving Messi an award and making him feel that he's one of them, because it is kind of honorary to have this
Right.
ceremonious cloth on top of it. In I don't know if ABC you were listening to the commentary, but the commentators in the UK were very negative about this, as with everything else.
Yeah, I heard.
Did you hear it, by the way?
I heard they were saying, "Oh, it's a shame that they covered his Argentina shirt," whereas I don't think it really did, because it was very fine black cloth, woven cloth, so you could
Yeah.
clearly see that he's wearing an Argentina shirt. But I think the BBC and ITV, they had certain agendas that they wanted to push through.
Yeah, look, I mean, I will say this. I had all sorts of misgivings about labor issues and other controversies that have framed the staging of this particular World Cup. But unless you live up to those principles, which in my case would be rejecting watching the World Cup and talking about it for hours on end, and hey, entire countries have boycotted Olympics before. All these people, England, Denmark, Norway, which didn't even make it to the World Cup anyways, Netherlands, USA, etc. All these people who were wearing certain signs and whatever else just to, flip the middle finger at the organizers, and commentators who are now crying about, just a ceremonial robe, more or less, put on why did they broadcast the thing? Why did they make money of it? Why did they send their teams? If they are so principled and so strict and so noble about the whole affair, why didn't they boycott the entire cup? Now they should just keep their mouth shut, honestly. I mean, again, I'm saying this as someone who had certain misgivings, and I still do, but I watched the World Cup, so I don't get to grandstand about, the whole ceremony cloaked in the national symbols of the host country. Was anyone against it when it was done in Russia? No, because it wasn't ostracized like it is right now. Back in 2018.
In fact, Lord, allow me to say this very quickly. In the European Union, in Brussels, for the past several days, there is a huge scandal that has broken, and has to do with members of the European Parliament who have received money to promote Qatar. But this is the duplicity of the politicians in Brussels. And I'm not a Brexiteer by all means. All I'm saying is that there are two sides to any story. There were many people who were willing to take money and to promote any agenda, and these were Europeans. And if they didn't want to host the World Cup, they shouldn't have given it to them, and they shouldn't have broadcasted. They shouldn't have done anything. But yet, they did it all, and that's fine. So, there is definitely, I agree with this duplicity that we often have. All I'm saying is that it was a very expensive enterprise, and for anybody else to do it like them, I mean, it's it's going to be a very tall order to come up with 200 billion. It shouldn't be. And I very quickly, I have a suggestion that these World Cups, as well as the Olympics, because they're beginning to be only for the super wealthy countries, it should also include the developing countries, and it should be either done on a revolving basis or do it between, you know, developed and developing. Otherwise, only the Koreas, the Qatars, and Americas of the world and Europe will host these things, which are beginning to be excessively expensive, and they don't use the stadia for anything. You know, in the case of Qatar, of course, they'll use them and export the stadia and take them somewhere else. But they have the power, the wealth to do it, right? Qatar is a country of 250,000 people sitting on, you know, huge amounts of natural gas. Anyway, sorry for the economics and side things a little bit, but you know, I think that they did a very good job. Despite all of this, they did a very good job. They organized it well. Now, you know, for 2030, the three countries that are competing, they're competing as a group against whoever else is competing. The three host countries, you know, Lord, which are vying to be the ones?
I don't know. I mean, I know 2026 is on, you know, in North America, basically, USA, Canada, and Mexico. 2030, I don't know who is trying.
Okay, I will break the news. Well, it's there. I'm not breaking really news. The three that want to host it is Egypt,
Okay.
Greece, and Saudi Arabia
Together.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, go crazy.
Okay. Now on Wikipedia, it's also saying there's Spain, Portugal, Ukraine, which seems very strange combination indeed. Because I mean, Spain, Portugal makes sense, and then Ukraine, interesting. And then there is Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and then there is Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. And then there's apparently an Israeli bid as well. I don't know how serious it is.
How are they going to do that? Israel, Palestine, Syria, or Lebanon? How are they going to do that?
If Israel does it, there's not going to be any mention of Palestine. I'm sure about that.
But this is, are they? This is interesting. Are they submitting by themselves a single bid, single country bid?
No, I think it says an Israeli-led bid. It says Gianni Infantino and the then Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett released a statement announcing Israel, a member of the UEFA, of course, because Israel plays European competition, had been exploring a potential bid with other signatories of the Abraham Accords, including the UAE and Bahrain.
Oh, okay, UAE and Bahrain. I mean, but poor Bahrain will have one stadium and it'll cover the whole country.
Bahrain is smaller, that's true.
I mean, they have the F1, so it's okay. It's interesting. So Bahrain, UAE, I can see the UAE, of course. They deserve to have it as well. With Israel, okay, I can see that. I think it should go to Latin America, Lord. They do deserve to have. They do deserve to host. But again, the issue is the financial impact for some of these countries. They want to do it. They have the thirst to do it, but then the economics of this is not conducive, and then they run into trouble. I mean, I've studied the Olympics and the economics of the Olympics. And usually everybody loses money, with some exceptions, of course. You know, Korea, they lost. You guys in the US have made money. Spain is the one that made money. London barely made money. Paris barely. Greece, huge losses. Anyway, Professor is talking to himself.
No, not at all. It's just,
We can go on forever. We can do these
I know
12-hour live streams
we can. If anyone,
like
They do
some of
exist.
our
They do
friends.
exist.
if anyone has the stamina, I certainly do. Turtle Knight says upvote reminder. Thank you, everyone. I actually went for more than half an hour more than what I initially imagined. I don't know if I'm coming back for tonight, but this has been a beautiful stream. I thank, first of all, my friends and fellow panelists, ABC and El Famoso Profesor,
Thank you.
who, of course, ABC is becoming one, but El Profesor is one of the main cast members of this show.
Can I say something? I listened to ABC several times in
Yes,
the
sir.
past, and I always wanted to talk to him. He brings a lot of depth. I really, out of all the streams that I've been listening to over the last several months, since you got me hooked, Lord, ABC, and again I will say Aussie Expat, and not to forget our dear and beloved Saad, have been the ones that I wanted to really interact. And ABC was the last one that I couldn't locate because also in my fair country. And he brings a lot of depth and knowledge, and his voice and reasoning is one of a very wise person.
That's very, very kind of you. Probably kinder than you ought to be, but I really have learned a lot from you today, and I look forward to learning more.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, SP and Saint Peter, for your super chats, and everyone else for their presence and support in the chat, for their contributions in the chat. If you want to contribute more, the information is in the crawling ticker, pinned in the chat, and included in the video description. For now, I'm saying goodbye. I might come back in a few hours for the late show. I might not. It's a Sunday night. I might go crazy. Let's see how it turns out. I first have to stuff my face with something. Take care, guys. Adieu.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.